Hello, Aaron here. And the other day I was using my trusty Mueller convection toaster oven, which I love. But before it was completely cool, with the utmost of thought, I picked it up like this and immediately threw it. So the next question would be, if you threw the oven, where did it land? Let me show you. Yes, I threw the dang oven right at my cupboard door and put a big ol' hole in it. I can promise you I had a few very colorful adjectives to share with myself. That person right there in the mirror. When I did that little travesty against my cupboard. But there's a few other things I want to point out about the cupboard. I do have to refinish it every couple years because that is the most used cupboard in my house. And for some reason, I lean my knees up against it when I'm doing the dishes, and below it, I'm always scuffing it with my feet. So I needed to do that anyway, so I'll take this time to do that. But one thing I would like to point out is that the door handle pulls that you can see on all the cupboards, and I have 23 of them, they cost over $4 a piece back in the day when I bought them, which was like, I don't know, over 5 years ago. And they're now over $5 a piece. But the finish is always rubbing off on them. That is very irritating. So I'll be refinishing some of those too, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Now, I don't have any jewelry or anything, but for some reason, the finish is always wearing off of these guys. So we'll just fix that too, along with that big old hole, and then at the bottom where I scuff it with my feet all the time. And if you look at the cupboard, right there is the mark where I rub my knees on it while I'm doing the dishes. Clearly I don't have marks on these cupboards because I don't get that close to the stove. Very different operation. And I handle this cupboard the most, so the top gets chipped a lot and it gets dirty where I'm always manhandling it. I am not easy on the things in my house, and that's why it's so cool that I built it and I can so easily repair it. On a side note, I am happy to report that the oven did survive my little throw against the cupboard. Although the door sticks now, because the whole thing's just a little askew, but it still works. I love my trusty Ryobi tools. One cupboard removed. So first things first, we got to get the hardware off. I think one of the mistakes that a lot of people make when they're painting cabinets or doing little projects in their home is they leave the hardware on and they try to paint around it, and that just looks awful. You can't do that. You gotta take it off. So, like I've said before, and I'll put a link down below to the video I made about building the cabinet for my little Jeep camper. I am not a construction person and I do not build cabinets properly. These I built to look similar to shaker style cabinets. But I did not make router lines within the frames and then insert this inside of all that. I simply just cut it out and screwed on the back. Quick, easy, strong. This was on its 6th year of service, so they last fine for me and they look fine for me. You do them the way you do them. I do them the simple way, just how I do it. All the hardware off, now we got to get all these little screws out. And I think these are number 6. They're little tiny screws. They're like that. Little tiny guys. Itty bitty. So with all the screws off, one of the challenges of not inserting it properly and just screwing it on the back is that the paint adheres to the frame, and these don't just want to pop off. You gotta work them off. You see what I mean? And it'll oftentimes damage this really thin 1/8 inch skin or insert that I don't insert when you take it off. So it doesn't make for refinishing very easy if we were to reuse this, because you can see it just ripped some of the plywood right there. So I think in the future, if I build this style of cabinet, I'm not going to paint them. I'm going to do a stain and then just put an oil and have them be natural, but that would require that I use a much more expensive wood product than just this utility panel stuff, so that it would have a nice look, like birch probably. So Just a thought for in the future when I build my next tiny house. So before I get started cutting out the new backing for the cabinet and sanding this to be painted, you always want to give it a light sanding or the paint will peel off when you're painting on top of paint. Same with these. I'm just going to use a fine sandpaper and just give them a nice sanding, and then we're going to give these a quick spray paint. So I'm going to do probably 2 or 3 coats on these. So I'm just going to set these handles on my paint stick on this little bucket because I don't care if it gets paint on it. And we're just going to do our best to get them fully coated in paint. And I like to use a satin, same with my cupboards. That's why I kind of have to refinish them every couple of years, the ones that have high use, because I don't like shiny stuff. And if you used a high gloss finish on the cabinets, I'm sure they'd last a lot longer and they're easier to clean. But I just don't like that look, so I like satin or a matte look. So just like on the cabinet I built for my little Jeep, sorry it's hot, it's like 86 out here, I'm sweating. This is just 1.5 by 3/4 inch wood, just cheap utility wood. I think they're like, I don't know, maybe $1.89 for each 8-foot section, or maybe $2.24, so real cheap. And I use pocket screws. You can see the pocket screws, and that's how I hold them together. And then the back obviously goes here, so you don't see those pocket screws once I get it all put together. So we're going to get this sanded so we can get it painted and get our new backing cut out and get that painted. I'll do 2 coats on the backing, and I'll probably do 2 coats on this as well, just because the frame is really what gets touched all the time and gets used the most. So I'm going to use a 120 grit. I guess it's 120. I don't know. It's a number 1. That's what I'm using to get this sanded so it'll accept the new paint without just peeling off. So this will be the front, or what we see, of our cabinet, because it's the nice smooth finish, because this side looks like that. So we will use this side to cut out the size we need. And I see a piece of the plywood already a little bit ripped over here, so we'll do it on this one. And I don't see any need to get out my measuring tape and my straight stick and all that one. I already have a template that we know fits perfectly right here. And I'll simply use the table to cut. Simple and easy, quick and fast. Now we'll just use a fine sander to clean the edges up a little bit. So this will be our finished side right here, and you can see it did take a few little chunks out of the plywood, but that's okay because when it gets mounted behind the frame, those are hidden. Perfect. Time to paint. I said this in my last video too, where I made the little cabinet for the Jeep. I do not like rollers that are, you know, like the little hairy kind, because the little hairs always seem to come out in your paint and you gotta take them out and redo that part. I like foam rollers. Nice finish they leave. And then just a simple disposable paintbrush. Trash. So to make my life simple, I'm just gonna paint these up here on the toolboxes, and then to dry them, I just use my clothes drying rack and I just stick them on there. And I leave one spot unfinished while I'm painting so that I can move it over and put it down, and then I just paint that while it's on the drying rack. So I don't want this old dried paint in my paint, so I'm just going to wipe it off before I pour this so it doesn't get caught up in there. And we're off and painting. I always find it easiest when doing these to do the inside parts first and then use the roller on the outside, because it leaves a smoother finish. And on to the insert. Make sure it's as clean as it can be. So the edges I'm not going to be too worried about, because once I put this onto the frame, I'm going to paint the back of it and the sides of it, so I'm not too worried about that. I do like to put that first coat on pretty thick to get into all the little cracks in the wood. So I got some painter's tape on the floor here so I can get these kickstands painted up while those other pieces are drying before their second coat. So in between coats of paint, I find the easiest thing to use to keep the paint fresh is just a nice good old Walmart bag. So I have 2 coats of paint on the frame and 3 coats of paint on the insert, or what's going to go on the back of the cabinet. So now we're going to install this with all those little screws, and then we're going to drill the holes for the handle, and then we're going to paint the back of this with 2 coats of paint and let that dry, and then it's time to finish this project. So what I'm going to do is just line this up as best I can by hand and put a screw in at each corner to keep it secure so it won't move, and then I'll put all the screws in around the edge. So I'm just feeling around the edge to make sure it's not overlapping anywhere, because perfection's not necessary in my house. My house is perfect imperfection. And now the anchoring screws. And I do have a towel down because I don't want anything to, even though the paint's probably dry on that frame, I don't want it pushing up into the paint and sticking to it, because when paint's semi-fresh, things will stick to it. So now that we got the back installed, or the insert, it's looking more like a cabinet door, right? Looking good. Now we got to drill the holes for the handle through the back of this, then we can get it painted. So I'm just going to take it off the edge of the table and turn it on high and drill through that back. So there we go. Holes for the handle. Time to paint the back. And these edges right here. And then we are almost done. Thank God. So I like to use the brush instead of the roller on the edges to kind of put a lot of paint in there to seal those edges. And I could use caulking, but my experience is this will seal it up after 1 or 2 coats. It tends to seal the edge real nice. Simple, quick, and effective. Now we will attach our handle. And there we go. The door completed. So after a long hot day in the sun fixing my stupidity, I'm ready to show you what it looks like. I refinished 3 door handles from the Home Depot for the 2nd time, but they're looking good. And I fixed that cupboard door. It's like it never happened. A brand new cupboard door. I think I called them kickstands earlier, but they're called toe spaces. Nice and refinished. And 3 handles. That one, and that one, all in the top cupboards, refinished. Looking good as new. And that is how I eliminated the idiot effect in my 6x12 tiny house.